You have reached the deepest depths of the internet. If it is greatness you seek, you've come to the wrong show. If it's about not wasting time, don't worry, you're never going to get your time back. If it's knowledge you seek, just be aware, any knowledge gained here is going to be minuscule. So now it's time for Accost the Field with Tony Gerdeman on the Ozone Radio Network.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Accost the Field. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr, talking everything Ohio State. Tom, how you doing?
I'm actually not going to be able to do the podcast. I've decided to leave Accost the Field early, withdraw from the podcast to focus on the NFL draft.
Do you realize that by making this decision, you are abandoning the fans who care more about this podcast than you do? You are being selfish, and what we do around here is next man up. But please don't go, Tom, because I don't want to have to call Shannon.
Oh man, the depth chart is real thin here. Things got real grim real fast. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this to the program.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. But Tom, please think of the children.
All right,
please.
All right, fine. I'll come back just at least for one more week.
That's all I ask. I'll have somebody else who can replace you. Maybe even do a better job. Be more reverential of me, or be reverential of me. That would be awesome.
I mean, good luck filling the position if that's one of the job requirements.
Yeah, good luck there. So we will get to the Nick Bosa turning his back on you, Buckeye fans, and choosing instead to worry about himself selfishly. But first, we'll talk a little bit about the Minnesota game, the 30-14 win over Minnesota. And if you want to get our instant reaction from that game, go ahead and check back at the ozone.net, click on the podcast link, and then scroll down to our instant reaction show from Ohio Stadium, where you can imagine everything that was pretty much everything that was said. I'm sure you can imagine. As we said at the time, nothing about that game was pretty. But Tom, if you were to pick the prettiest thing out of that game, what was the best thing you saw on Saturday?
It's very nice that you let me go first, and I get the free space on this particular bingo card, which is, hey, KJ Hill caught a football with one hand, and then he did a pretty funny celebration afterwards, and didn't get flagged for that pretty funny celebration. That was by far the best thing that happened anywhere in Ohio Stadium on Saturday. It's
pretty remarkable that we're 7 games in, and the best thing we saw is no longer Dwayne Haskins going 33 for 44 for over 400 yards. And I was looking at the box score, and I think he had 5 or 6 passes broken up. So of his 44 passes, only like 5 were unplayable by the offense or the defense, which is pretty remarkable. And yet, as we don't move totally forward into the Purdue talk just yet, but if we look at his last 2 games and this upcoming game, I wonder where last week's will fall, because the week before that he had 6 touchdowns, but he also had 2 interceptions, 455 yards passing. This past week, 412 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. But I think last week's might end up being the third best in what we're going to see in this triumvirate of 1,200 yards and then some, maybe 1,300 yards over these next 3 games. So it's just funny to me that we're already bored. Tom Orr is already bored with what Dwayne Haskins is doing at Ohio State. But Tom is also ready for Dwayne Haskins to move on so that we can actually see some good offense around here, led by
the one, the only Tate Martell. I mean, it's coming. The Tate Martell era is about to dawn on Columbus, Ohio, and it shall be glorious.
No more of the 600-yard bull crap. You were talking 700 yards.
I've never seen an infinity symbol in a box score before. I can't wait.
So you've got that to look forward to. Looking forward to stuff with this team this year has been difficult because of the worst things that we see routinely. And for me, Tom, the worst thing was, again, maybe it's 3 or 4 games in a row for me personally, but the running game was not even below par. I hate how par is used in sports vernacular other than golf because it's the exact opposite. So I'm just going to say it's terrible, worse than terrible, when you rush for 92 yards on 32 carries, a long carry of 12 yards, a 2.9 average, and now Ohio State is reaching depths with their running game that they haven't seen since 2004 when Lydell Ross was the starter, Antonio Pittman was a freshman, and Brandon Joe was probably the most consistent runner on the team. I think he may have single-handedly gotten Ohio State out of some tough spots in the 2004 Michigan game. So we're talking some really, really poor performances, and this one was the worst of them all. And the last time they were held under 100 yards, I believe, was the Clemson 31-0 shutout. And Tom, is there anything else that could be worse than the Ohio State running game this past week?
I mean, giving up 7.1 yards per play to a Minnesota team that came in 111th in the nation in offense wasn't real good. That was, to get outgained by Minnesota just on RPO plays, basically, and I mean that was pretty bad. The run game, I do think the run game is probably worse, because they got outrushed by 2.5 yards per carry by Minnesota. I mean, that is just unspeakably bad. 2.9 yards per carry. I mean, to give up 5.4 to Minnesota is bad, but to rush for 2.9 yards per carry against Minnesota, that is, you can't imagine how bad that is. There's almost no context. I mean, you really do have to go back to like the Lydell Ross, Mo Hall, it was Mo Wells on that team. I mean, like some of those teams that were just like so bad at running the ball. And to think that this team that has the passing attack that it does, that should be forcing people to back up and should be having a very easy time running it with the running backs that are as talented as they are, it is crazy to me that this is this bad.
It's interesting. The week before, they held Iowa to 2.7 yards per carry. They held Miami of Ohio to 2.9, New Mexico State at the start of the season to 1.9, and then there's this at Maryland where it's 8.5 yards per carry, and Ohio State should be much closer to the Maryland number than the Iowa number, you would think, and they're just very far away from that right now, and for a number of reasons. We get so many questions, and just so you guys know, the listener questions, we're looking at doing a separate show later in the week with all of the listener questions, because we had some from last week we didn't get to. We've got a bunch from this week, so we might just pull it out and do it as a just like a mailbag podcast type of thing. And then, Tom, by doing that aside, I've completely lost my train of thought. But the Minnesota defense, like you said, it shouldn't be containing the Ohio State running game like this. And people ask, why is this? What's wrong? And do they say, is the offensive line too tall? Is it because there isn't a running quarterback? Is it because of this? Is it because of that? And it's because of all of it. I don't think it's just one answer.
I think that the coaches are probably trying to adjust to a very different run scheme this year when the quarterback goes from the central focus of the run game in a lot of ways to basically a total non-factor in the run game. That's an adjustment, and they have to kind of get that figured out. I would have thought that they would have this figured out by now, because they have some pretty bright offensive minds on that staff, and they certainly have had no trouble adjusting from quarterback who's a just okay passer to quarterback who is, future NFL first round kind of passer. That hasn't been a real tough adjustment. So I don't quite understand why the adjustment's been so tough in the run game. But I think you have to assume that the offensive line is a huge part of it. That there's been a fall off there from the Billy Price center, Michael Jordan left guard, Jamarco Jones left tackle. That left side of the offensive line to drop off to Thayer Munford and Malcolm Pridgeon and Michael Jordan at center. They have been okay, but they haven't been as good as they were last year. And Isaiah Prince had just an inexplicably bad game last weekend. I wonder if, at some point 2 months from now, we're going to find out that Isaiah Prince had some kind of an injury or something that we that hasn't been reported. Because that was such an uncharacteristically bad game for him. And, Carter Coughlin's a very good player for Minnesota. We said that on last weekend, that he's maybe the only guy on that team, or at least on that defense, that Ohio State actually recruited, that Ohio State wanted. So I mean, he's not a bad player. It's not like you got beat by someone who's a substandard player that's going to be probably an all Big Ten kind of caliber player. But he has faced all Big Ten caliber players before and not had days like that. So I don't quite know. Like I said, it would not shock me if we found out at some point that he was nursing some kind of an injury. But at this point, it seems like half the team is hurt one way or the other.
Which means, that the bye week is coming at the right time. But I asked Kevin Wilson about the offensive line, or, what he thought was wrong with the running game after the Minnesota game. And we probably talked about this a little bit on the last show. But he said a lot of it is just they have to stay on their blocks longer, and that requires a certain attitude. The running game requires attitude. And that's why I asked Urban Meyer on Monday are they getting what they need out of the center position. That used to be Billy Price. That used to be Pat Elflein. That used to be Jacoby Bourne, Corey Linsley. That's the apex of the offense, as Urban Meyer calls it. And they set the tone for the entire offense, basically, those guys. And Michael Jordan's a soft-spoken guy. Is he doing that? But again, I mean, he's just a true junior. And you think back, Tom, how often we talked to Billy Price every single week, once or twice. I mean, he was a spokesman for the team. He was a captain. The same thing with Pat Elflein the year before, Corey Linsley, Jacoby Bourne. Like, these guys are always front and center. Michael Jordan isn't necessarily front and center, and that's off the field. But that's all. That's an aspect of being the leader of the offense, and we're not seeing him necessarily. I wondered if he wasn't necessarily being as, I guess, aggressive or as vociferous or as whatever he needed to be as that apex of the offense. But of course, Urban Meyer said he's doing fine, and I think he's pretty much said, Urban Meyer has pretty much said, like, everybody's doing fine. Anytime you ask him about somebody, they're either elite, pretty good, fine. It's been really hard to have any coaches like criticize players. I don't know if it's a little different than in the past where he he's never going to throw somebody under the bus, but it just seems like everybody's doing really well.
Well, they say that, and I think that the way that they have handled, complimenting guys and not criticizing guys in the past has been a function of he knows that when his teams are playing really well, the biggest concern is not letting them get too big-headed, too far out over their skis, because that's when they get in trouble, is when they think, oh, we just beat Penn State. We just had a huge comeback against Penn State, and J.T. Barrett completed his last 16 passes, and now we're just going to go to Iowa, and Iowa's terrible, and whoops, that didn't go well. And you think back to when have they just turned into just absolute murder ball, and it's when, they lose to Michigan State in 2015, and then everyone's ticked off, and then they go up to Ann Arbor and just beat Jim Harbaugh bloody. And then last year, they lose that Iowa game, and everyone jumps off the bandwagon, and Michigan State comes down here, and Ohio State just absolutely kicks the tar out of them for 60 minutes. So that's been how he's had to handle it in the past. This year, they have guys who are not performing, and, it's not going to do him any good to come out and talk to us and say, yeah, these guys are really playing like crap. That doesn't do him any good. So I think what you have to do is you have to look at how they're measuring things internally. You don't have to listen to what they say. This is one of these, look at what you're doing, not what you're saying. How often are these guys, whoever you're talking about, how often is that person getting named a champion? That will tell you how they actually feel about them. Because, you can say, oh yeah, he's fine. But if whoever you're saying that about is is a starter who's not getting named a champion and hasn't gotten named a champion 3 out of the last 4 games or something, then that tells you that really internally they probably think that person is not doing fine.
That's a good point, because we do get told basically who grades out with a winning performance. And also every Monday and Wednesday when we're in the team room, like the list of Buckeye leaves is right there as well. So they don't keep everything completely a secret. So, I guess he doesn't have to throw anybody under the bus if he's, putting other modes of transportation out there for us. And we can read the fact that the left side of the line the other week, did not grade out as champions, and the right side did not grade out as champions last week. I mean, you kind of expected that. So there are ways to get around coach speak. And speaking of getting around, Tom, and not in that way, I was thinking getting around an offensive tackle. And Nick Bosa is now off to the NFL, not directly. He's going to continue his rehab and then go train, maybe with his brother out in California. Leaving the Buckeyes, Tom, high and dry with a completely selfish decision that, had Joe Burrow not transferred, Joe Burrow as a captain would have never allowed this to happen. Dwayne Haskins allowed it to happen. Your thoughts?
Oh man, hot take radio. We're gonna get a show on Sirius XM by the time this segment's done.
That's the
plan. I mean, look, this is a lot. There have been very loud, all caps kind of responses on Twitter from small pockets of the fan base, but I think in general, people probably understand that, look, this is a business decision for someone who is 6 months away from being set for the rest of his life. And, he is not the inner city kid who just wants to buy his mom a house. His dad was a first-round NFL draft pick. His brother was a first-round NFL draft pick. They're not, he doesn't have to move his mom and dad out of a bad neighborhood. But he has the opportunity in 6 months to basically be set for life on his own and not have to rely on his parents or rely on his brother or, anyone else. So you can't really fault him for not wanting to risk that. If he was healthy and just sitting out, I think that would be a little bit more of an eyebrow raiser for me. The timetable was such that he was maybe going to be back for November, maybe, but we didn't know whether he was going to be 100% at that point. And if he wasn't going to be 100% until December, or close to 100% until December, do you want to come back just for the last few games? I mean, there's a lot of risk there. There's no, everyone who's upset with him, there's no risk on your part. There's a whole lot of risk on Nick Bosa's part. So I drew this analogy on Twitter on Tuesday when the news came out. But, I was a journalism major at Ohio State. And if I knew I was 6 months away from a $30 million job and I broke my typing hands my last quarter at Ohio State, and it was like, well, if your hands are good and ready to type again in 6 months, you're going to make $30 million. But if not, if you're not healthy, then that could cost you that could cost you $5-10 million. Guess what? I'm probably not rushing back to go be the sports editor of the Lantern again, and risking my journalism career for 3 more weeks of college newspaper glory. And this is obviously a perfect example because that is exactly where the salaries for journalism are right now. So, it's a pretty direct parallel for me. So it might be harder for people in other fields like engineering or rocket science or, I don't know, literature, English degrees. I don't know. But you can't blame him. It's just, this goes right to me, right to, when guys are trying to decide, should I go to the NFL or not? I can't blame you for leaving school a year early, because if I mean, anyone out there, if a company had offered you $1 million a year to leave school early and leave your, math degree and not get your degree from the math department or the theater department or whatever it is, if you had $1 million job offer waiting for you, you would have left a cartoon style hole in the wall running out of your dorm to go take that job. It's easy to criticize people who are, basically performing for your entertainment right now. If you were in that position, you would be crazy not to do the same thing.
I don't know what kind of dorm room you were in, but our walls were like solid prison bricks. So you can't run through those.
For $1 million a year, I'll figure it out.
I'll just keep running into it until I get it dented, and then I'll chisel my way out with a spoon. It's always easy for people to say, he's turning his back on Ohio State, but this is a decision that very few people have the opportunity to make. So you can't relate to it if you're upset with it. I get that. But you have nothing to compare it to other than what you think you would do. And trust me, what you think you would do is very different when, like you said, there's $30 million staring you in the face. That's what the top 3 picks are going to look at this year. And most of it's going to be, maybe all of it's guaranteed the way contracts are working right now. And it was interesting to me that, originally his dad was saying he'll be reevaluated in November. Tom, it's still October now, and the decision has been made. But this is also a family who is as well tuned with every core muscle in your body that you have. I doubt any of them have physiology degrees, but they are well equipped to know where things stand in terms of his recovery, where he'll be when he's, and it's not just, being able to, 100% is different for different people. Nick Bosa is an elite football player. He's not just going to want to go back out there when he feels better. He has to be completely ready. This is a guy who stretches, hours a day to play football. And just, getting back to 100%, I don't think that necessarily for him, that would include everything that he normally does to play football, not what normal people do to play football. He's basically a supercar. And if there's just one little thing wrong, you're going to notice it, and he's going to notice it. And so, for me, if I get the flu, and this is how I'll equate it. You get the flu and you're down for a while, and you're back to 100% when you can have Taco Bell again. And that's slightly different than where we are compared to, and I say we because I don't want to be alone in this analogy, compared to where Nick Bosa is. He's not just trying to get back to where I can have Taco Bell again. He's trying to get back to where I can really have Taco Bell again. And that takes a while after a flu.
I like the fact that you eat Taco Bell right when you're feeling better, and when I eat Taco Bell, it's usually right before I start feeling bad. So that's fun that we're kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum there.
But still the same spectrum. I also thought the further away he got from Ohio State or from the injury, and the further you get away, the easier it is to stay away. And when this originally happened and he went off to Philadelphia to have surgery, I was told that he would not be coming back, basically. And so then when we saw him at practice the other day or the other week, we both, and we talked about it on the show, the fact that he's back is very good news, and it's indicative of a guy who would like to come back and has intentions of coming back. Now, what we don't know is was his body really at a position to allow it? Was it recovering at the rate that they like? And his dad had pretty much already written it off, saying it's a 12-week recovery, which puts him out to December. So I think we got a lot of information from the parents passing it down, because initially he's not coming back. And then from Urban Meyer, you get the opposite. We're hopeful, we plan on having him back. But from the people at the top who have always viewed this, we were told, 4 to 8 weeks, but others, it can also be 8 to 12. And I think you look at this elite athlete and you're thinking, well, he can recover and return sooner than most people because he's an elite athlete. But they're looking at it as because he is an elite athlete, he might need longer to recover in order to be where he is. And then you get into this time frame of, yeah, he could be back for the playoffs or even, maybe the Big Ten championship game. But what if he hurts himself again and now you're kind of screwed? So, yeah, we talked to the players, talked to some teammates Tuesday night. Jordan Fuller was happy for him. He said, that's my brother. And anytime you have generational wealth staring you in the face, you have to make that decision for your family. Really, Dwayne Haskins, Dwayne Haskins didn't have a lot to say about it, Tom, but nobody we talked to was upset with him. Not that you would expect anybody to be upset, but, he's not been around for a while, so this isn't, and that's one other thing that Jordan Fuller said, it's nothing new, but what did Dwayne Haskins have to say?
Dwayne Haskins basically said, I respect him. I get it. I wish him the best. I mean, there was no one said anything other than that. Basically, it was, there was no one who had anything critical to say. Which, I mean, you certainly, even if they were thinking it, you wouldn't certainly expect them to say anything like that. But honestly, the most interesting reaction of the people I talked to, that was Ryan Day, Greg Schiano, and Dwayne Haskins. The most interesting reaction was Greg Schiano. And go on the Ozone, if you're listening to this, go on the front page of the Ozone. This was posted Tuesday night, and the title is something like Watch, Buckeyes talk about Nick Bosa's departure or something like that. Watch the Greg Schiano interview. And he was asked about it very early in the interview. And there are a couple times when he pauses for 4 or 5 seconds. And I don't know if he was stopping to compose himself, like it was an emotional thing, or stopping just to sort of think about what he had to say. But I mean, that is not something that we really see out of him. So, I don't know if that was, if this was a really disappointing thing for him, or if that's a real, he's viewing this as a very tough blow to the team. But it was a little bit of an uncharacteristic response from him. And again, you're kind of reading between the lines, because everything he said was basically, yeah, he has to do what's right for him and his family, and I respect him and I understand it, and everyone understands it, and it's a next man up thing. But just it was twice. It wasn't once he had a scratch in his throat or something and just had to kind of swallow or whatever. It happened twice, and it only happened during when he was talking about Bosa. So that just seemed kind of interesting to me. And I mean, go ahead and watch the interview. We streamed it live on Facebook, and you can watch it on the front page of the Ozone. And I mean, tell me if I'm crazy, but that was the most interesting thing to me, was just whether that was emotional or what. It was that was the most interesting thing of anything that anyone said, because everyone else was just kind of wish him well, next man up, basically.
I think back to the 2016 season when this became a thing at the end of the season with Christian McCaffrey and one other player. Do you remember who else sat out the bowl game that year?
I don't remember who else sat out. Was it Leonard Fournette? Might have been Leonard Fournette sitting out the LSU game. Yeah. So
Ohio State was obviously in the playoffs, and that was a topic with asking the players. I talked to Billy Price about it, and Garyon Conley, and others, but every single answer from the Buckeyes was, that will never happen here. The brotherhood is too strong. That's not who we are. We'll be there for our brothers. And then, of course, the next year, Denzel Ward skips the bowl game, and long live the brotherhood, I guess. But that's a decision that was it's no longer abnormal. It's at this point, it's almost expected. Not that everybody's going to do it, but when it does happen, it's not a surprise. This Nick Bosa being hurt, it makes me wonder when somebody is going to do it healthy, in terms of say Nick Bosa would have been healthy and Ohio State loses 2 of their first 3 games, national championship is over. Tom, do you foresee eventually somebody's just going to be yeah, I'm not going to play anymore. I'm just going to prepare for the draft. and that way I can stay healthy and not risk getting hurt anymore. And I know some people will be like, well, GMs won't like that, but GMs don't mind you leaving a bowl game. Where would and leaving that early, like in September, might be bad. But do you think GMs would that negatively impact them to the point where it would negatively impact the draft stock, and it would be better just to play? Or because I think this is eventually going to happen, where somebody's like, you know what, I'm going to pack it in. But I think that would also speak poorly on the coaching staff and the program there. But it's going to happen.
It is going to happen, and I would guess that the first time or two that it happens, it's the kind of thing that might reflect negatively on the player in terms of NFL teams evaluating him. And then if it gets a little more common, then all of a sudden that's just the new norm, and then that is just how it works. And you have to keep in mind, these are players who are playing for basically nothing. You're playing for scholarships and, room and board and your little monthly stipend, and that's it. And in the case of someone like Nick Bosa, Ohio State got a whole lot more value out of the room and board and scholarship and stipend money that they gave him than that money. They got a whole lot more value in terms of on-field production and how that translates into championships and bowl games and merchandise sold and all that kind of stuff. So, I would have a hard time getting too upset with any player who makes that decision. It's a personal decision. It's a business decision. I mean, there's a whole separate argument about, maybe this is a different discussion if the NCAA adopts the Olympic model and Nick Bosa can go do car commercials in Columbus and make a few $100,000. And, maybe that doesn't make a difference in Nick Bosa's case because Nick Bosa already has, family money. But in the case of other players, like, so if someone who comes from a disadvantaged background, where a few $100,000 can make a big difference, maybe that is enough to keep someone playing and provide them a little bit more, a little bit of cushion and a little bit of incentive to keep playing and remove some of the risk to them. So, I mean, that's a whole separate podcast. But I mean, every time you say, oh, this could never happen at fill in the blank school, or no one will ever do whatever, I mean, the general trend is in this direction, and I certainly don't see it stopping.
The idea of players doing commercials, now I have in my mind, like personal injury lawyers having Nick Bosa, like in their commercials and be like, has Nick Bosa injured you? And, you have like Nick Bosa just destroying random people. And like, have you been injured in a Nick Bosa accident? If so, call. And then you'll have like Nick Bosa just, with shrugging after he, running over each person. So there's definitely money to be made there. I'm with you on that one. Car commercials, all kinds of stuff. White Castle, Wendy's commercials. Tom, this is Columbus, baby.
There's an opening at Bob Evans.
Too soon, man. Gosh, why did you have to go there, Tom? I have in here the question, are the Buckeyes still a title contender? Except I don't think it's a proper question because we've already decided that the way things are going, they aren't title contenders. So unless they fix other things that have nothing to do with Nick Bosa, or maybe it has a little bit to do with Nick Bosa, then I don't think they are title contenders. This doesn't, to me, eliminate them from being a title contender. And, to be a contender, you don't necessarily have to win. You just have to contend. That's what that means. But do you think, are their chances gone now?
I don't think their chances are gone. And, it's funny. Before the Nick Bosa news came out on Tuesday morning, I thought, I think we've been too negative the last few times we've done shows, after games in the middle of the week last week. And I think we should try and be a little more positive this week and, talk about the fact that the 2014 team did not, we've touched on this, but maybe go in a little more depth on this. The 2014 team really did not look like a championship team at this point in the season. The 2002 team did not look like a championship team at this point in the season. And I don't think if you are a college football team, a major conference college football team, and you are undefeated, then you are a championship contender, assuming you continue to improve and grow throughout the year. We have not seen a whole heck of a lot of growth out of this Ohio State program in certain spots, offensive line, some of the back seven play on the defense, but that does not mean that you can't see that growth. I mean, you look at what the offense looked like at the end of the regular season in 2014 versus how they looked in the last 3 games of the year. That was not like a slow, gradual improvement. That was a switch flipped, and then everything, and then all of a sudden everything was on fire in a good way. There is nothing that says that can't happen. Maybe this is just something that requires a personnel change somewhere, whether that's an offensive line personnel change and all of a sudden, boom, they can run the ball. We've talked about, Brady Taylor coming into center and you move Michael Jordan to guard or something like that. Maybe there's some kind of a change like that, or Brandon Bowen coming back at some point later this fall. It could be something as simple as that, and all of a sudden, boom, they can run the ball, and then voila, this is the most explosive offense in the history of college football. Or, Sean Wade turns into a fantastic safety and then that solves a problem. Or Isaiah Pryor. I mean, you talked to Jordan Fuller today. Jordan Fuller certainly seems to think that Isaiah Pryor has taken significant steps forward. So, if you continue to see this growth, this is a young team. That's worth remembering. This is a young team. There is one senior on the 2 deep on defense. And it's a backup linebacker, Dante Booker. This is a young team with a lot of first-time starters. They've had some injuries. You get through Purdue, if they get through Purdue unbeaten, you get the bye week, you get a chance to get guys healthy. You get Robert Landers healthy, you get Draymond Jones back to 100%, you get Damon Arnett potentially back to 100%. Then this defense has a chance to look like it was supposed to look at the beginning of the year. And then, then you are a championship team. As long as you are in the national championship hunt, in that article I write every Sunday night or Monday morning, you are a major conference team that has not lost 2 games, and you're still in championship hunt, then you're still in championship hunt, and you have a possibility of getting there.
You mentioned the 2002 team. That team only really looked like a national championship team against Texas Tech, Washington State, the first half of the Miami game, and then the overtimes. And that's all it took. Maybe a random Iowa game in the middle there. But I think I mentioned it after the Minnesota game. Just get through October. You can look as ugly as you want. You get the wins. Just get through October. Nobody remembers the next year, or everybody is so reverential of the 2014 team, 2002 team. Like you said, Ohio State, 31-24 against Minnesota. JT Barrett needing to run 86 yards in the freezing cold and the snow. Just get through October, and the only thing people will remember is the win-loss column. That's all. And 2 weeks after the win looks great, no matter how ugly it was. And like Al Davis, just win, baby. So yeah, I'm with you. We have been harsh, but I think it's warranted. But it's not like the season is over, even though Nick Bosa's season is over. But I will say this, and this is real. Urban Meyer is 17-0 at Ohio State without any Bosas on the field, and he is 60-8 with a Bosa on the field. 8 losses. 0 losses with no Bosas. That includes 12 wins in 2012, 1 win in 2015, and then I believe that's 4 wins this season. So this is almost, I'd probably say it's a blessing in disguise now that they no longer have the albatross of a Bosa weighing them down. I'm sure Urban Meyer, he said he was hopeful. I think he was lying.
I think you would be a fool not to go to Vegas right now and just put all of your money on, mortgage your house, take out a second mortgage on your house, put all of your money on Ohio State minus whatever they are in the national championship. What are they, 12-1 now or something like that? I mean, it's free money, right? I mean, there's no chance they lose now. Now that they have finally rid themselves of this terrible burden of a Bosa on the team.
Yeah, and if you are saving money for like your kid's college fund, put that in there as well, because you are going to be so rich that your kids won't need to go to college. They can just be leeches, just, and plus college anymore, it's really not worth how much you're paying for it. So go all in, because science and math have shown us that Urban Meyer does not lose at Ohio State when there is no Bosa stinking up the joint. So just think about that. Of course, somebody now will have to step up in his absence, and that's Chase Young, that's Jonathan Cooper, that is Jayshon Cornell. Tom, a guy I would like to see get some time at defensive end is Draymond Jones. I asked him about that a couple weeks ago, and he said he would do that absolutely. But, you talked about making changes, a few minutes ago, and that's something that really this defense, this offense, just unwilling to do in terms of personnel changes. And that was, I asked Kevin Wilson after the game, do you foresee as the offensive line to a point where you might need to make some personnel changes? He said no. Urban Meyer said Wyatt Davis is getting very close to playing. But, I would like to see Draymond Jones get some snaps there. I think Haskell Garrett got some snaps at defensive end this past week, but Urban said that was because Cooper was out. Now with Cooper back, they've got their 3-man veteran rotation. Then you throw in the freshmen, so they don't necessarily need Draymond outside. And they like what they get with them inside. But heck, I'd like to see him get some snaps out there. How about you?
It would certainly be interesting, and that's just a function then of where do they feel they have better depth right now, at the end or the tackle position. If you feel like you've got better depth at tackle, then sure, slide him outside and give it a go. Because if they have Jonathan Cooper back, I would guess that you're probably not going to see that this week because they have Jonathan Cooper back. If Cooper was out another week and it was just Chase Young and Jayshon Cornell and the freshmen and then you're down to Haskell Garrett playing outside, or behind them it's basically Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Alex Williams, and that's it at end. So if they were down Cooper this week, I think that you might actually see that. But the fact that they had Garrett out there last week and not Draymond Jones, on the backup, I think that probably tells you they're going to keep him inside.
One last thing on Nick Bosa. Finished with, I believe, 10 career starts. Final season only played in 2 home games, and really only the first half of those. Only played in mostly the first half of the TCU game. Got hurt early in the second. Ohio State only got 5 years and 1.5 games out of the Bosas. Has it been worth it, Tom?
We are about to embrace debate so hard. We are about to embrace debate so hard. I can feel it. Here it comes. I'm going to go extremely hot take and say that the Bosa era has worked out okay for Ohio State with the national championship and the 2 probably top 5 draft picks and the many, many sacks and shrugs and all of these things. I think that in general the Bosa era has worked out. It was not a 100th percentile outcome for how well it could have worked out, but I think it has worked out okay for them. How about you? Do you think bad or really bad?
Well, the thing is, you had 2 Bosas. How many national championships did you get out of them? You got 1. These are a pair of brothers. That means 2. Players are supposed to play for 4 years. You take 2 and you multiply it by 4, and that's 8 years. And the Buckeyes barely got 5 out of 2 guys. And in those 5 years, only 1 national championship. So, yeah, I think they could have gotten more. It's a lot like when the Vikings drafted Adrian Peterson. Yeah, did you get an all-time great running back? Sure. But how many Super Bowls did you win? None. And the Buckeyes did win a Super Bowl, but they could have won more. And they would have, and it's so disappointing. Nick Bosa wanted to win a national championship, or at least he said he did. and he gave that opportunity up this year. So you think of the attitude that these guys came in with too, just so cool, so easygoing. So, give me a break. Yeah. I think you get 2 Winovich brothers, you'll get 9-10 years out of those guys. And no, you won't get any division crowns. And no, you won't get any national championships. And no, you won't usually beat Michigan State. But you know what you get? You get 9 or 10 years out of those guys.
That's a good point, Skip. I appreciate that.
I don't know how they do that, man.
I think you have to look at it like this. I mean, you had 2 Bosa brothers. They won a combined 1 national championship. That works out to just half a national championship each. And I mean, who outside of Ann Arbor wins half a national championship? That's not a thing. Like, come on.
I can't do this anymore.
I have all those like Stephen A. Smith like crab rangoon tweets in my head now. just want to start doing Stephen A. Smith stuff now. So just fall apart and just do that now. It's gonna be great.
That takes a lot of effort to come up with stupid things to say and like try to sound like you believe them. Like, but it takes more work than just I would have had to prepare more or prepare.
Here's the funny thing. Truly stupid people can say stupid stuff really easily. So, I mean, it kind of makes you think. Like, why is it hard for you to say stupid stuff if stupid people can do it easily?
Yeah, is it because I'm like really stupid or just moderately smart? I don't know. It fluctuates from day to day.
I'm just gonna let that one hang.
But Tom, so now let's move on to Purdue week. And really, the whole show could be about Purdue because, Tom and I, after interviews tonight, we're standing on the sidewalk talking about Purdue, and, we had to stop because we're basically doing the show for nobody instead of the show for somebody that we're doing right now.
Literally dozens of people.
I mean, it's more than that, trust me. But this is a team that the Purdue team and a Purdue game that we pointed out well before the season as the trap game. And we both expected Purdue to be better this year. And don't get sucked in by their record. They could very well be undefeated right now. 3 losses by a total of 8 points. They could have won all 3 of those. And even if they had only won like 2 of those 3, if they win all 3, they're ranked probably in the top 15, top 10, something like that. So this is a legitimate team in the fact that this Ohio State is concerned, and they should be. 1, because of the Purdue offense, and 2, because of the Ohio State defense. But Tom, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being least likely, how likely is an Ohio State loss this weekend? I've got a number in my mind. Let's see what your number is. Go.
4.
I went 3.75. I should have said you could go 2 decimal points.
No, you can't go 2 decimal points. You have to round. So now we're both at 4.
Oh, there you go.
We are terrible at embrace debate.
Good answer, Tom. Thank you. The road game, the night game, the fact that Purdue has a history of doing this to Ohio State, I didn't really look at I don't have the series history in front of me, but it's pretty even, I'm guessing, over the last 12, 20 years. We've seen, go back to 2000, just inexplicable plays here and there, losses. That was it the 2013 game that was close here, the 2009. I'm just throwing numbers out there, but I think like Ohio State missed an extra point at some point and lost the game to Purdue. It's just when we talk about rivalries, I almost feel like there's a Purdue rivalry with Ohio State more than a Penn State rivalry. Like there used to be an Illinois rivalry with Ohio State in the 90s. There's not a rivalry with Purdue, but there's something there where they're just like the fly in the ointment,
The funny thing is, they seem like they beat Ohio State like a really strangely high amount of times, but it only happens in West Lafayette. They've won once in Columbus since 1967, so that's once in 50 years they've won in Columbus, and that was 1988, which basically doesn't count because that was the worst Ohio State team probably of that last 50 years. But Ohio State lost in 2011. Ohio State in West Lafayette. Ohio State lost in 2009. That was that bizarre Terrell Pryor 5 turnover game the year they won the they won the Rose Bowl, but they lost to a 2-6 Purdue team. They lost 2004, the week before the Michigan game, and they lost 2000. That was the year Drew Brees took Purdue to the Rose Bowl. I mean, that they have lost there more than they have won since 2000. They're 3-4 in West Lafayette since 2000, and that includes 2002, which is a game you probably remember, dear listener, for one play at the end of the game. But Ohio State very nearly lost 2002. They won comfortably in 2007, 23-7, and they won in 2013, 56-0. But I mean, that one, they could very easily be 2-5 in West Lafayette since 2000, and it's hard to draw a total parallel there, in a straight line to this year because no one on this team has played there. The last time Ohio State played there was 2013, so. None of these guys who are going to be, playing meaningful roles for Ohio State on Saturday were on that team. So, and the last loss there was 2011. So, I mean, that was even before Urban Meyer came here. So you can't, I don't think you can necessarily say, oh, that definitely means they're going to lose, but there is a weird series history there.
And, it's going to get, I don't want to say weirder, but I think we're both expecting an exciting game, a game that could go either way, which I think Ohio State's 13.5-point favorite. And we say it could go either way because of Ohio State's defense, Ohio State's defense, their inability to run the ball. And the inability to run the ball leads me into the next question on the same scale, 1 to 10. How likely is it for 400 yards passing from Dwayne Haskins for the third game in a row? And before you pick a number, let me say I will go. Okay, I've got my number. What's yours?
8.
Yeah. I went with 8.5. We round that down. No. And I went with 8.5. We go up to 9. At this point, it just seems inevitable, which means it's not going to happen. But Purdue's defense gives up a bunch of yards through the air. So I think there's sometimes they're decent on the ground against the run. I'm sure that Ohio State will set out to prove them wrong. But at this point, Tom, I can't buy into this running game. And if, just like with all of these other two 400-yard games, the Buckeyes have trouble running it, and yet they need to score because the other team is scoring, then they're going to have to throw the ball. And that means, Dwayne Haskins left, Dwayne Haskins right, up the middle, whatever. And when I say that, I mean throwing it, not like JT Barrett running it back in the day. A day that, back in the day that Urban Meyer longs for, cherishes lovingly. But at this point, it just seems almost like a foregone conclusion that 400 yards is going to happen, which means that we've all just bought in too much.
It seems like it's set up almost perfectly for him to break the Art Schlichter single game passing yardage record of 458. I mean, it's the only thing that even gives me a little bit of pause is it's supposed to be kind of windy there, but that's not a stadium that really channels the wind like Illinois, where it just blows, just howls end to end. So I honestly, we had this conversation a month or two ago, and I said, I had my real hot take that it was more likely he'd have 2 400-yard passing games than 0 this year.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that? Okay. Well, maybe we edited it out. I don't know. Listeners, be sure to let us know in the comments. Leave a review. Let me know if I said that. I have another one. It's more likely he throws for 500 yards this week than less than 300. Agree or disagree?
I agree with that because he should have around 240 by halftime, and then I don't see them just sitting on the ball, for the entire third and fourth quarter. And that's a pretty crazy thing to think of an Ohio State quarterback, that 500 yards is more likely than 299 and under. It's it's just so foreign when I'm sure, like, if you were to, that would be a great question for Urban Meyer on Wednesday, and you would get no answer, but you might see a little blood come out of his ear just from the thought of it. Like, you're right. That's where we are right now. This is my team. And then he would begin to sob uncontrollably. And then Tate would be starting on Saturday night. So maybe it's a win-win for everybody.
Urban, when you listened to Tom say that earlier today when you were listening to our podcast, as we know that you do, thank you for subscribing. Please leave us a 5-star review.
He'd leave like a 2-star review and just, ask other Buckeye fans to do the same. And you know how Buckeye fans are. They follow the coach. They do what he says. There are concerns for the Buckeyes defensively, and one of the main concerns is the way Tim May was referring to him. When talking about Rondale Moore, that little number 4 guy, that little fella number 4, and everybody knows about him. Rondale Moore putting up very good numbers for a true freshman. And I had his numbers up earlier, but I think he's averaging, I don't even know, for yards from scrimmage, maybe like 120 or something like that. Running the ball a little bit, catching the ball, but I am setting the over-under at 162.5 yards, Tom, knowing that he's going to be running in the slot, and possibly they watched the Minnesota game and saw what Minnesota was running, these newfangled slant routes. And just so the listeners know, slant routes are a new invention. That's why the Ohio State defense had such difficult times with them. And you wonder, Tom, do you think they had time to put that route in over the last week? And what could it mean for Purdue?
Yeah, Jeff Rom, who has run a pass-heavy offense, who was a quarterback in college, I'm suspecting that was not the first time he saw a slant pass in his career. I'm going out on a limb that's probably not like a new. He didn't have to spend too much time like Googling what is a slant pass. That probably had that in his head already. I'm going to read through his Rondale Moore's just receiving yards this year, just game by game. 109 against Northwestern, just 16 against Eastern Michigan, 137 versus Missouri, 110 versus Boston College, 85 versus Nebraska, 101 versus Illinois.
5 touchdowns.
I'm going to 5 touchdowns. Yeah, and so he's 558 yards receiving, 139 yards rushing. So he's basically 700 yards in 6 games. So it's like 115-ish yards per game total offense. I'm going to take the over on 162 total yards against Ohio State. I will be fascinated to see how Ohio State defends him, because until you see them really shut down an offense, I mean, they look terrible against a bad Minnesota offense last week. Again, on a team that's not really known for, not loaded with coaches who are known for being, offensively explosive coaches, with a true freshman quarterback and a bunch of true freshman skill players and true freshman offensive linemen. They got gashed for 7.1 yards a play. Almost whatever number you gave me for Rondale Moore, I would have just taken the over, because until you see them stop someone that's really good, really explosive, I would take the over. And, maybe this will be like the Michigan State game last year where I pick Ohio State to lose and then Ohio State goes out and just absolutely clumps them to death for 60 minutes. I mean, it's possible. Like, maybe this is the week they figure it out, but the trend has not been, they're getting closer to figuring it out every week. They're getting better every week. They're getting closer. You can see it's definitely improving. It has just been real stagnant for the last 6 weeks. So, I would take almost any number you could have given me there, I probably would have taken the over, and I'll take the over at 162.5.
I went 162.5 because that's the average of his two high games in terms of yards from scrimmage. The Northwestern game where he had 188 yards and a Missouri game where he had 137 yards. Both losses, but by a total of 7 points. He's like a small Paris Campbell, basically, in terms of like how many touches he gets and his production. And he's had, I think, just 2 games this year, Eastern Michigan and Nebraska, where he didn't score. They could have used it against Eastern Michigan, which I still don't understand how they lost that game. They lost it 20-19 at home. They lost to Northwestern 31-27 at home. They gave that game away at the end with a stupid defensive penalty. The Missouri game lost 40-37. So these are all games that were very winnable, but this is still a program that's learning how to win. Now they've won their last 3. Boston College, at Nebraska, at Illinois. None of them have been really close. 14 points against at Nebraska was the closest. And this would be a program, I don't want to say program defining, but like it would light it up. If they can pull off the upset, it would change the program in terms of like the exposure. It's national TV. Crowd's going to be going crazy. This is the biggest thing to hit Purdue, I don't know, since Glenn Robinson, back in 1991. I mean, this isn't, actually probably Joe Tiller and Drew Brees, but it's an opportunity for Jeff Brom to continue building a program that we've seen Purdue. Purdue was, if there was a Big Ten West back then when Joe Tiller was doing it, Purdue would have been the Wisconsin back then of, this is our division and we'll see you in the Big Ten championship game. This would be the first big step towards Tom Wood. I think he could get them there as long as he stays, but you wonder how long he'll stay.
Well, I don't wonder how long he'll stay. He'll stay exactly as long as it takes Louisville to scrape together the money for Bobby Petrino's buyout. And that may not happen this year. I mean, but Louisville is a flaming plane wreck this season if you have not been paying attention to the ACC. But they have, they just bought out Rick Pitino, and I think they're fighting over the buyout legally on that one. But Papa John just got kicked to the curb, so they just lost one of their big boosters. So, they may not have the money. I think his buyout's something like $14 million. I'm doing that off the top of my head, which means it's quite possibly way wrong. But
$80.
It's either $80 or $15 trillion, somewhere in the middle there. I think it was something like $14 million or $16 million or something like that. So it's not, and at Ohio State, if you had a season that looked like it was going to end up at about 2-10, you could get a bunch of angry boosters together real quick and scrape together $16 million to kick that guy out. That's a little harder at Louisville when you've just, excommunicated your biggest booster, Papa John, recently because of some unfortunate comments that he made on a telephone call. So he's circling back to Jeff Brom, which is where this all started. He will be there, I think, at least another year. But this is a chance for a signature win for him because they had a huge turnaround last year from, absolutely, that program was absolutely dead under Darrell Hazel. Just absolutely dead, like a Rutgers level punchline for multiple years. And he comes in and in the first year gets them to a bowl game, and didn't they beat Arizona last year? Yeah, everyone in the Big Ten won their bowl game. So yeah, they won the Foster Farms Bowl, I think, last year. So, that was a team that kind of went a little bit under the radar because I think they finished 6-6 or 7-6 or whatever it was. But that was a heck of a coaching job. And they started out slow again this year, so they're not going to end up with that gaudy 10-win total that makes everyone's eyes pop. But this is a chance to win a game that you really, then Game Day is doing a story on your program next week on, hey, look at what Jeff Brom is building at Purdue. He needs one of those, and maybe that's Ohio State, maybe that's I don't know. Do they have Wisconsin later this year? So maybe they get Wisconsin, something like that. But yeah, he needs one of those kind of signature wins at some point to really kind of put his program in the spotlight, because they are clearly building, but they're kind of still building under the radar right now.
When we were doing the show at the WAC out in the parking lot, we were talking about the Ohio State secondary, which may be without cornerback Damon Arnett this week. He's still questionable. I don't even know what the injury necessarily is. I think the speculation is concussion at this point. But if Damon Arnett cannot go, then you've got at corner Jeff Okudah, Kendall Sheffield. At nickel, you've got Sean Wade. And then the safeties, you've got Isaiah Pryor and Jordan Fuller. And they would like to ideally rotate those corners, but now they can't unless they do some rotation with Sean Wade. But Tom, like we were talking, you would think that they're going to be a nickel quite a bit against the Purdue offense, which throws the ball a lot. And also by going nickel, you don't want to get Pete Werner or an outside linebacker matched up on Rondale Moore. And I know Sean Wade was part of a 93-yard touchdown, a couple weeks ago. But by going nickel, you match up better with the Purdue defense. But also by going nickel, you no longer have any rotational parts, which puts a strain on the Ohio State defense the entire game. They don't really have any other corners that they would be comfortable bringing in. Marcus Williamson isn't at that point. We haven't seen him do it at this point, so it would have to be brand new for them to do it. And as Kerry Combs always said, I'm not going to bring in somebody worse to replace somebody better. And, when he tried for years, a couple years to get this rotation going and couldn't because he didn't have a good number 3. Now they're missing that, if Damon Arnett cannot go, they're missing that number 3. And Tom, that puts the secondary at a very, it's going to be a long night and you've got a defensive line that is not totally healthy. It's going to be a tough night for that secondary.
Yeah, this is not the team you want to play the week before your bye week, when you are probably at your most banged up that you're going to be all season. This is the team you want to play afterwards, when you potentially have a fully healthy defensive backfield back there. Without Arnett, then your nickel package is Kendall Sheffield, Jeff Okudah, Sean Wade, Jordan Fuller, and Isaiah Pryor. And you're right. I don't think that there's anyone else they're comfortable having out there, because Marcus Williamson he's been banged up the last couple weeks, because we have not seen him at all the last couple weeks, and he was playing a little bit before that. So, you have, without him, then who's behind those guys? You've got, if you don't have Arnett and you're playing Okudah, who's behind those guys? You have, Tyreek Johnson, Josh Proctor. Amir Reep and like Brendan White at safety. The two corners are true freshmen. If you put like a Josh Proctor at nickel or something like that, you're getting into true freshmen, and that is, you really don't want to get into that. And so you have depth issues where if one more guy gets hurt, then you're really in trouble. But you also have rotation issues where these are guys who are not used to playing 60, 70 snaps a game, because they have made a point of rotating, especially at that corner position. So if you have to play 60, 70 snaps, that's a real, that you have a chance to have guys getting tired and be giving up big plays in that fourth quarter. This defense has made it kind of a hallmark to control teams in the second half, to play better in the second half. It certainly seems like they're wearing teams down in the second half. If you don't have that opportunity, because you don't have the option to rotate and keep guys fresh and stay fresh throughout the whole game, so you're closer to 100% than they are at the end of the game. I think you're no longer gonna see those pretty second half stats. That if Ohio State's corners start wearing down and your safety start wearing down, that's when you're gonna see some. That's when it becomes a real dicey 60-minute game.
I also think that can affect the Ohio State offense, where, they like to run tempo. They haven't done it as much, super high tempo. They like to do that, But do they think, you know what, we're thin in the secondary, we need to give them time to recuperate? And then does that hurt the offense because they can't keep moving along at the pace that they would like? The Purdue also can run the ball, which should definitely be a concern. Looking at their numbers, they've had some big games. Like they had 341 against Eastern Michigan in a loss. If you rush for 341 yards and you lose, something is wrong. 188 against Nebraska, 227 against Illinois. To me, these are big numbers now because I cover Ohio State. So my idea of good rushing is skewed a little. So 227 seems like a lot right now for me. The ability for Purdue to be two-dimensional makes things, even more difficult. And, you get the run pass option, the slants, all of that. And it's not just Rondale Moore. They can do multiple things. And then, Tom, there's going to be trick plays. And Ohio State knows that they're going to have to be prepared for them. But that's nice to say. But right now, do you feel great about this defense handling a trick play or three?
They have been so out of position on some regular non-trick plays that maybe that means they're in position to defend the trick plays. So maybe this ends up working out just fine. I think that I don't know that you need to. I mean, Minnesota ran a trick play last week for a 41-yard gain on like a reverse flea flicker pass. You can do that, but if I would worry less about the trick plays than what happens if Purdue doesn't feel like they have to run trick plays because they're moving the ball without it. That would be the real concern if you're the Ohio State defense. What if Purdue can move it without having to resort to kind of one-off? Like, it's great if you can run the whatever Statue of Liberty play or, run a reverse or run a, throwback pass or that kind of stuff. But you do that once and that hits for one big play and that's it. If you have to be able to do kind of bread and butter stuff to move the ball and win a game, because 1 or 2 touchdowns is not going to win this game for Purdue. They're going to have to win this. They're going to have to score 40 points at least to win this game, at least. So, I wouldn't worry too much about the trick plays, but Greg Schiano talked on Tuesday night about the importance of discipline and the importance of dotting your T's and crossing your I's. And someone asked him, how is this team doing with dotting their T's and crossing their I's? And he kind of, they're getting better. They're working on it. So, that's a very nice way to say, nope, they're not doing it. So they're going to have to dot those T's and cross those. No, wait, reverse that. If they're dotting T's and crossing I's, they're really badly off. You know what I mean?
Well, you explained perfectly what's wrong with the defense. I think we've just figured it out.
See, we need to go back to the embrace debate thing where I dig in and say, no, T's are dotted and I's are crossed. Well, I don't know where you're from.
That's preposterous. I think that maybe the game comes down to whether or not Ohio State can run the ball. Because if they can run the ball, then I think they can do anything. And that will also keep Purdue's offense off the field. So if they can run the ball, I think they'll be fine. And I've also, like the past day, this has been feeling like one of those games where Ohio State really comes together, and like the Michigan State game last year, or like the 2007 Purdue or Penn State game with Todd Beckman lighting up the Nittany Lions. Just everything comes together, and maybe the moment is too big for Purdue. There's a lot of pressure on them. So if the Buckeyes can run the ball, I really, 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 really like their chances. Now, Illinois last week rushed for 69 yards against Purdue.
Nice.
Eastern Michigan in week 2 rushed for 69 yards on Purdue.
I'm picking up a theme here.
But then, 2 weeks ago, Nebraska rushed for 259 yards. Missouri rushed for 233 yards. So they can, and they have given up yards on the ground. this has to be, Tom, the week that the running game, I should say it has to be the week the running game returns, but at some point you'll need it. And, they need help. The offense will need some help. You can't just do it with Dwayne Haskins. And even in the fourth quarter, running the clock out, or when you need those tough yards, they will need the running game this week. And I think they'll need more than the 89 or whatever yards they had last week. Can they win with under 100 yards again, which was the first time in a decade that they won while rushing under 100 yards? Can they do it again if need be?
I mean, they can. It's probably going to be a game that will make everyone want to throw up if that's how they have to do it. Because if they can't run it, then, I mean, you went into it a little bit there. You open yourself up to all sorts of, the defense gets tired then, and you can't control the ball. You need, there is going to be a point at some point when you need to just have a 6-minute drive, kill the clock, keep the Purdue offense off the field, give the Ohio State defense some rest. Run the clock out so you don't have to just keep matching them touchdown for touchdown like a Big 12 game. They can win without a 100-yard rushing game, but I wouldn't recommend it. They can, Dwayne Haskins can throw for 450 yards and 7 touchdowns, and the defense can force just 1 or 2 turnovers. You basically just break serve once or twice when Purdue has the ball, and you win the game 56-45, and then everyone goes into the bye week screaming and sad, and they can win that way, but you're not going to have you cannot win decisively that way. Put it that way.
Yeah, David Blau has thrown 2 interceptions this year in 187 attempts. He threw one last week, and he had only had thrown one in the first 5 games. So he's not a guy who turns the ball over. And Greg Schiano, he said that this is an aggressive defense that Ohio State plays, and they rely on turnovers. So it'll be interesting to see who wins that battle. I don't think you necessarily need to turn Purdue over to beat them. I don't want to make too much of Purdue because they did lose to Eastern Michigan. They did lose to Northwestern, and they did lose to an SEC team. So let's not build them up too much. But at this point, Ohio State just got done beating Minnesota by 16 at home. That required 2 red zone turnovers, 2 missed field goals. So you put that kind of situation on the road, and tables can turn, and things can get bad really quick. I don't know if you remember, Tom, the Iowa game last year. Do you remember that?
In basketball, I don't remember it. No,
you'll have to Google it.
Iowa State.
No, Google.
Okay. Okay.
It would be Ohio State at Iowa, 2017. Things didn't go great for the Buckeyes. Let me just say. And this
the box score just came up. My eyes, the goggles do nothing.
Still, I mean, that fact alone keeps me from ever doubting that can happen again, because we saw it with our own eyes, goggleless. So we know bad things, unspeakable things like that can happen. I don't have a score prediction right now, but I'm leaning pretty well to the Buckeyes. I don't know about 13.5, but I don't have this feeling not dread, but this is not going to go great for the Buckeyes, even though I do think there are going to be times where things do not go great. What's your feel on it right now?
I have gradually trended more back towards Ohio State as the week has gone on a little bit. I think after the game on Saturday, when we were leaving the stadium, I said, I might pick Purdue next week, and I think I would probably pick Ohio State at this point. Earlier I said 40% chance that Purdue wins. So there is a very realistic chance that they win the game. There's all sorts of different scenarios where Purdue wins this game. It's kind of counterintuitive, but the fact that it's a night game, for some reason, I kind of feel like that maybe helps Ohio State focus a little more. Like when they lose to Purdue, I think of that 2009 game, and I think it was a noon kickoff, and they were just they kind of went in there sleepwalking, and and then all of a sudden you lose to a really crappy Purdue team. I think that like a noon game that's a kind of the old noon ESPN Plus kind of game
Yeah.
or noon Big Ten Network kind of game, like that's the kind of game where you sort of see them losing to Purdue. I think something about that prime time will probably get Ohio State pretty focused. This is not going to be a Penn State atmosphere where there's 100,000 fans for the other team. This is probably going to be, what does that stadium hold, 60,000 or something?
Yeah.
And it's probably going to be at least a quarter Ohio State fans, maybe more, maybe a third Ohio State fans. So, this is not a crazy hostile atmosphere you're going into. I think that I would, I'm certainly leaning towards Ohio State, but yeah, I don't think I'd lay 2 touchdowns if I was betting on it.
The fact that they've gone into Happy Valley prepares them immensely for this. There is no preparation that Purdue has had that comes close. I mean, hosting Missouri, no. Hosting Northwestern, obviously not. But I think it's going to be a tougher ticket than normal for Buckeye fans, where it could have been 60-40 Ohio State fans like it normally is. That's going to be a taller task this time around, unless Purdue fans know that they'll be able to cash in. So we'll see what they do. But I think that'll do it for us. Tom, you got anything else? Have we covered everything that we could possibly cover in the hour and a half that we've taken to do it?
I can't imagine there's anything else in the entire universe we could possibly want to talk about.
All right, so we thank you all for listening. Like I said, we'll have a listener question mailbag breakout probably for Friday to get your weekend started. Make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network. Make sure to check out the content that we've got there, all the stories. All the questions that you have are pretty much answered on the front page every day. So keep reading, keep listening, and we will talk to you guys later.
Steal a car